Thank you very much to the organizers for also inviting the EEA to this very interesting conference. Firstly, actually, I'd like to say that since we are also located in Copenhagen, we certainly had problems ourselves. We are located in Kongens en Nytorv, and also last year, our basement of the EEA was flooded. So it certainly brought a message back home that there is an issue we need to deal with even at our own scale. The good thing was that now we have a better canteen, which is improved in the basement. So what I'd like to actually do very briefly, because I think there's a bit of lack of time, is to firstly mention that we are an agency as an EU institution. We are working with all the EU 27 countries, but in addition with 5 other member countries very briefly. That includes, for example, Norway, Switzerland, and Turkey as well. And we are providing information not only to the Commission, but also to the member countries. We work very closely with our member countries and to the European Parliament. And when we speak about member countries, we often mean the agencies, environment agencies, nature protection agencies, but also agencies dealing with water issues. It was very well described by Matteo Rini this morning, so I'm not going to go through all the EU policies again. But I think it's important to recognize that this is one of the main challenges at the EU level, but also nationally, to mainstream climate change adaptation into these policies, but also to ensure that there is coherence across the policies. And in fact, we should also admit that currently there is maybe lack of coherence in some areas. So the climate change challenge even highlights that and also forces us to think better in the integration. But just to mention very briefly the water issues are of course covered by the Water Framework Directive and the Floods Directive. We are heavily involved from EEA because we collect the information from the member countries, we compare the information, we make reports out of that, which hopefully is also of interest for the audience here. And as you probably know, under the Water Framework Directive, the river basin management plans had to be reported last year. They're now being scrutinized. There is a lot of attention to that. And increasingly, climate change adaptation is being mainstreamed. But a lot needs to be done more. The same is true for the Floods Directive. And another key thing is that from the Commission perspective, there is very much focus on water in 2012. They are working on a so-called water blueprint. I'm sure you've heard about it. It was discussed already a lot. And by the end of this year, they will come with proposals how to further enhance water policies in Europe and also addressing climate change, which then will feed into this climate change adaptation strategy, which was already mentioned by Matteo Rini. Last point maybe to stress also that a lot of the information, if we look at climate change impacts and adaptation, is coming from research and also hopefully in future from a GMES climate service. So there is another challenge to make sure that the research is somehow coherent. And this is quite different from much of the information we receive on more the traditional issues like water quality, air quality. We depend a lot on research results. We produced in 2008 a report on climate change impacts across Europe. This slide shows what the coverage was. We looked at a number of indicators. We also looked at assessments of what is happening in Europe. We want to enhance this now. We have another report coming up by the end of this year. And these are the main objectives of the report. So the types of topics we cover are climate variables, as was mentioned also this morning, but also the impacts across sectors. And if you want to have a complete assessment, it does take quite an effort because you have to look at across both environmental sectors in a way, but also at economic sectors. If we look at water, the issues have been mentioned before, so it's of course dealing with river flow, floods, droughts, but also looking at what are the effects, for example, on hydropower, cooling water. If we look at water quality, temperatures of lakes and rivers are increasing, changes in ice coverage, and freshwater quality is also affected in a quite complicated way. So there is, for example, northward movement of different species in rivers and lakes, changes in phenology, and the issue of algae, and maybe also related to that, for example, bathing water problems could be increasing in future. So if you summarize it all, it looks like this. The types of issues we are dealing with are different across Europe. This is a map showing the effects across Europe with the biogeographical regions as the map below. And issues have been mentioned before. In Northwest Europe, we have winter precipitation changes, river flows, northwest movement of species again, and coastal flooding, but also, as was mentioned, of course, before, the urban drainage flooding issue. This slide shows the increases in river floods over the last 10 years. In fact, I should stress this is not sufficient time series lengths to say anything about climate change. You need much more data actually to look back. So it's very difficult to, at the current stage, say how much is due to climate change. But at least there are indications that climate change has already been a factor. But the main reasons, as we know, they have been mentioned already, is increases of economic assets in risk areas, increasing human activity in risk areas, better reporting. Maybe you are surprised, but in fact there is not a good database of river flood impacts in Europe. We have to look at global databases. It's a bit scattered, the information, so there is still quite a need to improve the information. But we know from the models the frequency and the intensity will increase of extreme weather events, and also seasonality changes will happen for the main rivers. So, for example, the peak floods, could happen earlier in the year in some cases, depending on the river, or it could shift even to later. And those are the things I think we need to be aware of and consider. Now, moving to the topic of water, we have quite extensive information this year on water. We're working towards a synthesis report on water issues by the end of this year, feeding very much, as I said, into this blueprint for what the EU is doing. And for the moment, we have a report published just recently on water efficiency. It's available here if you are interested in that. And I'll say a few words more. We will also have a report by the end of the year focusing more on floods, water scarcity, and drought issues. So the report on water efficiency, actually many of the things have been said before. You can look at it from improvement of technologies, what are options, better irrigation, leakage reduction, saving water, reduction at the source, etc. You can also look at economic instruments, water pricing. Again, as was mentioned this morning, water pricing is not yet fully done in all sectors, like, for example, agriculture. Full cost recovery. To what extent can we also include environmental issues into the cost? Transparency, more transparency, because the slides are shown on the water prices, but it's really important to know why the prices are actually different. And it's also important to look at subsidies, which could have an adverse effect. But in fact, if we look at water efficiency, it's not only as such a topic we need to focus on. We need to focus on the broader picture. Why are we doing this is also because we need to look at the ecosystem services aspect. So very broadly, this is trying to show that there is a need to think about allocation of water to the different sectors. Agriculture, industries, public supply, etc. We talked about it before, but in the boundaries of sustainability, so in the boundaries of what is needed under the Water Framework Directive to achieve good ecological status by 2015. And to make sure that the information is also available. We don't have sufficient information actually on the water accounts across river basins. So again, it's a plea for better information. Moving to another report on urban issues. This report is also available. It's very much linked to the project mentioned by DG Klima, Matteo Rini, in the morning. This is a report which focuses on the main issues in cities: heat waves, flooding, water scarcity and drought. It's looking at planning of urban adaptation, learning very much from examples like in Copenhagen. So the report also contains a number of examples of the different stages the cities are in across Europe. And it makes a plea for multi-level governance, where the issue is that, in fact, cities are not, of course, on their own. They have a link to the national level, but also to the EU level. These are the main messages. Again, actually not new, they have been mostly said already, but just going through them quickly. Climate change is an additional pressure on already issues being already taking place, urbanization, competing demands for water, etc. There are specific challenges for cities which are different from, let's say, the country as a whole. Urban heat island effects, issues of soil sealing, I'll come back to that a bit later. The issue that adaptation now can already be done and can show that it will lower damage costs for the future. Investments in urban infrastructure should already look at adaptation. Important to look at water retention areas in cities, urban drainage, mentioned before. Maybe to stress green infrastructure. We believe this is really an important measure, can be very cost efficient, and it also has multi benefits. It's not only meant as an adaptation measure as such, it can help to enhance biodiversity even within cities, in the city context, but it also can be in general a good way to improve the quality of cities. And again, the point about the support needed from national and European level is very crucial. So soil sealing, I mentioned it before. This map tries to show that there is an issue of soil sealing related to the projections of number of days with extreme precipitation by 2100. So that's the blue, basically blue area where there is a high increase in these numbers of days with extreme precipitation, and then the cities which have high soil sealing, so basically the yellow dots will have an issue. So obviously this is in northwestern Europe, and again it shows also that Copenhagen is one of these cities. Now moving to the last few slides, this is mainly to highlight that we have what we call the Water Information System for Europe. It contains a lot of information. You can find it on our website, but one of the things we are now including new is the information coming under the under the Floods Directive. It only starts now with the management level, so you can find information on that, but that's maybe not that interesting. But eventually there will be the preliminary risk maps over the next years, and then the final risk maps which the countries have to submit to the Commission. And also the risk management plans, which have to be submitted in 2015. So that information will be in WISE. Now, last slide is on climate adapt. You may wonder, why do we have two different systems? Well, the idea is that the Water Information System for Europe very much is linked with the Water Framework Directive issues and with the Floods Directive, while the climate adapt, which was extensively presented by Matteo Rini already, gives the broader picture of what is what are the issues around climate change adaptation in different sectors, in different environmental themes, and in different geographical areas. So we're very happy to work with DG Klima to improve the Climate Adapt platform over the coming years, and hopefully you are also interested, and we're very interested also in your feedback. You can find the website here, it was mentioned before. So I'd like to finish here my presentation. Thank you very much. Thank you.